Start. Go ahead. You're
Why do I always have to start?
you're wasting valuable Zoom time.
All right, why don't we start with the what to do if your car lease if your lease comes due during this coronavirus pandemic? Aren't all the different financing services telling people to do different things, or what's the status? What are people supposed to do?
I honestly don't know what they're doing. My suspicion is, especially in areas where they have a shelter in place, like Northern California, where the dealerships aren't even allowed to be open, that I don't know how they would handle leases that are due or coming due, other than my suspicion is that they're probably just automatically extending them on a month-to-month basis until things can return to some sense of normal, and to where customers could actually take the vehicles into the dealerships to drop them off and terminate their lease at the end. Because things that are required to do your lease turn in, you have to check the physical condition of the car. You have to get the exact vehicle miles. You have to get signatures from the customer, either electronically or on paper, stating that those were the exact miles and they understand the condition of the car and any charges that there might be associated with any excess wear and tear. So if dealerships aren't open, it's pretty hard to force your customer whose lease is up to come and bring the car in.
Yeah, and I've done some of the research around the different manufacturer captive lenders, and also
well, the captive lenders are basically the only ones that do leasing anymore anyway.
I'm looking here. I pulled up some information Edmunds had put together. So, for example, Chase Auto, which does Subaru, Mazda, Jaguar, Land Rover, etc.
Yes, but that's their captive lender for Subaru and Jaguar and Land Rover.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Regardless, what they're saying here is that the lease end extension is one option, which they are pretty crystal clear. You just keep making your payments. It'll be extended for 6 months, and then we'll go from there. You don't even have to call us or anything. You can return your vehicle to the dealership, which, as you're saying, if you're in a state or you're in a region that has the shelter in place and the dealerships aren't even really, I mean, they're open, but by appointment only, and maybe you don't feel comfortable actually doing that, maybe that's not a real option. But then what they have here, and this is Chase specific, is they have the, what's it called here? You can contact your dealer and you can have home pickup. So you can have a home pickup request, which is another option that they're specifically offering. So it sounds like you have a few options, but it all depends on who your lender is. And this list that Edmunds put together, pretty much all of them says call them and ask. That at the end of the day, that's what you need to do, because no one's quite sure what to do with those lease vehicles. You got to call them and ask them.
Well, this is uncharted territory for the captive lenders and the dealerships. Nobody's ever confronted this before. So, there are a huge number of leases coming due, millions of leases coming due, and so with that being said, what are they supposed to do with the cars when they actually get them back?
Yeah, and there's actually another article that I read recently. I forget who, it may have been Bloomberg. I think it was a Bloomberg article about the rental car fleets. Mm-hmm. All of their cars are about to come. I guess they don't lease. Do they lease them or do they finance them? I don't know.
I think they lease them.
I think they lease them.
Yeah.
And they're going to be coming off lease over the next 2 to 3 months and then flooding the market.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this huge concern that there's going to be this cratering in used car prices, but a huge asterisk and caveat there being a lot of shoppers are savvy enough to know they really don't want to buy a rental car as a used car, even if it's CPO'd and things like that, just because of how rough the driving can be.
Yeah, but there are people that can't afford to buy anything other than that, because the pricing on those cars is typically considerably less than what non-used rental cars would go for.
Definitely.
and 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 yes, there will become a glut of used cars, and because of that glut of used cars, there will be a downward trend on used car pricing, um, which will create another problem for dealers in that, since they're not really open for business, and their used car inventory is sitting there and it is aging, and while it's aging, it is depreciating faster than it's ever depreciated before, so that once things return to normal, dealers will be sitting there with inventory that is, well, underwater. They could have $3 or $4 million worth of used cars that they bought at $4 million, that is now worth on the open market, if they were to wholesale them to try and get out of them, maybe $3 million. So there's
Yeah,
huge losses waiting to be had by dealers because their cars are just aging. The market value of the cars are going down faster than they normally would, and dealers are going to be in a tough position because of that when things open up again.
yeah. Which, if you taught me anything about the auctions, is that there are two types of auctions out there. There are the Mannheim auctions, the ones where essentially this third-party private company hosts used car auctions, and then there's also the captive lenders host auctions. So, if you're a Toyota dealership and all these RAV4s come back from Enterprise, what the heck's the price on that going to be? Do you really want to bring that inventory in stock? And then another consideration would be for the consumer side. Let's say I go in and I want to buy one of those RAV4s, but I need to trade in a car. The dealership isn't going to want to, they will to facilitate the deal, I'm sure, but they don't want to buy another used car. And that's the polar opposite of where we were 90 days ago, where, we had friends who literally their job was just to buy used cars for the
Yes,
dealer groups.
yes. Now, and when we say that there's captive lenders, that have the auctions, those are actually done by Mannheim or Odessa or the others. It's just they're closed to that brand on that particular day. But it still goes through the normal auction channels. It's just not an open auction, it's a closed auction. But the dilemma is not just going to be for the dealer. I hate to break it to you, the value of your car has slipped precipitously in the last few weeks and will continue to, because if there's a downward spiral on the value of the cars that are sitting at the dealers' lots, well, that means downward pressure on the cars that the consumers are going to want to trade in. So that the likelihood that somebody is going to be the proud possessor of negative equity has jumped dramatically. Because if your car is depreciating faster than it has in the past, well, you're not going to be in an equity position anytime soon. It's actually going to extend the time before you're in an equity position. So this downward spiral is not only bad for the dealers, it's bad for the consumers. It's bad for anybody that owns a car. It's bad for the lending institutions that own the leases, because the leases were based on assumptions as to what a car should be worth 3 years from now. Okay, and that was extrapolated from what things were worth 3 years ago. Well, 3 years from now is going to look completely different than present day. And so, for instance, my Mini, which might have had a residual value, I think, of 63% or 64% of its original MSRP for 3 years from now, well, it's not going to be worth anywhere near that. It might be worth 50%. Well, who's going to absorb that 14% loss other than, well, the captive lender?
Yeah, the person who leased out the car. So if my lease is coming due right about now, what would you do if you were in that situation? If you and you call up and you have the option of, sure, we can take that car back. So you could go down that path, or you could do a month by month or a 6-month extension. What would you do? Would you trade the car back in? And let's say the requirement is you need mobility, you need another car.
Well, if you need another car, and before, I would think, if it were me, I would try, if my lease was coming due, I would try to get into a new lease sooner rather than later before the banks make the decision to really adjust their residual values moving forward. Okay, because the residual values are published for a month at a time. So let's say the beginning of April, BMW looked at its typical residual values and said, okay, maybe we should reduce them a point or two. Well, in May, if there's no cars being sold, they're going to go, maybe we should reduce them 5 or 6 points. So the cost of leasing the car is going to go up. So if you need to get a new car and you like to lease your car, it's probably better to lease it sooner than later while the residual values are still artificially high.
Which is probably just this month.
Yes, that would be my guess. I think everybody is going to look at it and go, well, geez, this is going to have a huge impact, and they're going to start adjusting things. I mean, that's just a guess, but
in your estimation, if your lease came due this month, go take a good hard look at what that lease rate would be to get in a new vehicle, because it's probably going to be, and the residual value on that lease is probably going to be the best thing you're going to see for the foreseeable future.
That would be my guess.
Then why wouldn't you just stay in the car that you currently have? Because it's got the.
Okay, here's the reason not to stay in the car that you currently have. Because if you stay in it on a month-to-month basis, and at a certain point, things are going to return to some degree of normalcy, and that lease is finally going to come due, and you're going to have to get out of it. And if that point is 6 months from now, and residual values have been adjusted 10%, guess what just went up? The cost of your new lease to get into the new car.
Gotcha. So you see it as, and again, you'd have to go get pull some numbers, but you see it as an opportunity to essentially get yourself a good deal for the next 3 years this month versus hold on to what is currently an okay deal for 6 months to then have a shittier deal for the next 3 years.
And then to find out after 6 months that you've really put yourself in a position where you're screwed because residual values have dropped so much. I think money factors will remain low, but I don't think the manufacturers are going to help underwrite the leases or have their captive lenders underwrite the leases to artificially inflate the residual values so that they can offer somebody a payment that's more affordable. I think 6 months from now, leasing will be more reflective of what real future values would be, as opposed to what it's been in the past, where they've been somewhat artificially inflated.
I don't even think it's 6 months. I bet you it happens next month.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean,
do the captive lenders publish what their residual values are? Like, is that accessible in automotive news and things like that?
I don't think you could get it from automotive news. You have to get it from the
captive lenders
themselves. Most captive lenders offer higher residuals because they work hand in hand with the manufacturer.
Yeah.
And I mean, there is the ALG guide, which is a guide for leasing future values, residual values, but that's not necessarily what the captive lenders use. The captive lenders establish their own residuals based on what their history has been.
They probably have, just like insurance companies have actuaries. They got their own.
Absolutely, they have actuaries that look at what the average cost of warranty repairs are going to be while a car is still under the factory warranty. So they know once the car is wholesaled to the dealer that now their profit, the manufacturer profit is going to go down a little bit, because they know they are now going to incur costs to offset some of that profit. So they know what the average
Well, I
One,
guess the point I'm trying to make is it's not as simple as they look at what things have been worth the past 3 years and then project out what the next 3. I mean, they hire smart people and whole teams of them, I'm sure, because this is how they ensure that they're going to make money. And that's why sitting here right now, what's today's date? We're at April 12th,
14th.
maybe 14th. April 14th,
Yes, the
things
14th.
are going to, things are going to look a heck of a lot different May 14th because they don't want to lose millions of dollars, potentially tens, hundreds of millions of dollars. So I'd imagine that we're going to see changes in what those residual values reflect starting May 1.
Yeah, probably because they're
And you probably already saw it change a little bit here in April
no
from
problem.
March.
But yeah, the other thing that's going to hurt them is there's going to be this glut of cars that are going to come off at a time when there's no real activity, and the value of those cars is going to plummet. So they're
So
going to
let's
be
talk
there.
about that.
Yes, go ahead.
Well, so probably the most successful video we've ever had on YouTube is one where we talk about what happens to unsold cars,
Uh-huh.
right? And in that video, you share with all of us that there's no such thing as an unsold car. You, in your 42 years in the business, you've never saw a car that goes unsold. And we talk about in that video, discounting and things that'll happen, and then ultimately sending cars to the auction and another dealer buying them. What the heck is going to happen here? Because you're saying there's going to be this oversupply, and there's articles like the Bloomberg one I mentioned and others. There's going to be this oversupply. What's going to happen to all these unsold cars?
The value of the cars is going to crater. The amount of loss that is going to be absorbed either by the dealer who had the cars in their inventory prior to this happening, or by the lenders, the captive lenders whose lease cars are coming back. They're going to absorb huge losses. Huge.
It's almost like whoever's holding the bag is gonna. Whoever's got the car on their lot, whether it be the lender or whether it be the dealer, or honestly, I can use myself as an example, sitting here with my Volvo S90 that just, I'm so underwater, multi-thousands of dollars underwater on that thing. Whoever has it is going to take the hit on it. What you're saying.
Yes, yeah. But if you're the consumer, you're only going to take the hit if you're trying to get rid of it. If you're the dealer, or if you're the captive lender with all the vehicles that came back, you're going to take the hit when you have to unload those cars. The consumer can wait. The consumer can continue to make payments until the loan is actually paid off.
When you say unload the car, what do you mean? What does that mean in terms of for the dealer, for the lender?
Well, the dealers, who are they going to unload their inventory to? More than likely, it's going to be the consumers. And the only way they're going to get consumers to buy them is to continue to lower the prices of them until, well, the consumer goes, that's too stupid of a deal not to take.
Yeah.
So now that deal on that particular car could possibly represent a loss, a real hard loss to the dealership of $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. They might own a car for $10,000 that they had hoped to retail for 12 or 13, that they in turn have to end up retailing for 7 or 8 because it's the only way they can get it off their books and create what's the most important thing in business? Cash flow.
Yeah.
And that's how they have to do it. It becomes distressed merchandise that isn't really distressed.
Yeah, you just got to get rid of it.
Yes.
So there will still be no unsold cars. There's just going to be cheaper and cheaper cars.
There'll be cheaper and cheaper cars, and it'll take longer and longer to get rid of what we perceive to be unsold cars. Yes, but they will ultimately be sold.
Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying there. The oversupply isn't so great that you end up with cars that sit in perpetuity. Eventually they'll find.
No, eventually everything gets sold. I've never seen a situation where a car hasn't eventually gotten sold. It'll get sold. It just won't get sold for what its present value is, because the longer it sits, its future value is going to nosedive. But it'll get sold. somebody will get tired of sitting on that cash and say, I'd rather have 5,000 of my $10,000 investment than continue to sit on that $10,000 investment and hope to get 6 when the following month it might only be worth 4.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah, you make a choice that you'd rather have the cash, even though it represents a huge loss, you'd rather have the cash.
And honestly, part of the justification to sell the car is probably less the fact that it's going to be worth less another month from now. It's the financing charge, the floor planning charge, the
Yeah,
interest that
yeah.
the dealer has to pay, which should be pretty negligible right now because the federal government slashed interest rates. But still,
but there's other issues. As cars sit, they deteriorate. Things go wrong.
maintain them.
Yes, things go wrong, and so suddenly a water pump goes bad, or suddenly a battery dies, or suddenly a starter goes bad because the car's been sitting in it and it hasn't been utilized. And well, now all of a sudden you have the expense of putting a new battery in, or a new water pump, or a new starter. So your cost in the car keeps going up, not going down. The car gets stale. You have to re-detail it again. I mean, whatever it is.
Sure.
So the longer it sits, I mean, I don't know why, but I've seen cars like disintegrate as dealerships. I've seen situations where rats get into the engine compartments and they chew up the wiring. Do you have any idea how expensive that gets to be?
No, I totally get it. So so what's going to happen with all these cars that are coming back on lease return, and also another channel that cars are going to come? People are going to stop making their payments. Cars are going to get repossessed. We saw that back in the Great Recession, didn't we?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it was early last year that delinquencies on car loans was at like a 19-year high. That people were the higher percentage of people were 90 days late or later with their payments than it had been in 19 years. Well, that doesn't bode well when you have an economy that's shut down, when you have a situation where 17 million people have filed for unemployment in the last 3 weeks. Yeah, there are huge consequences that will be felt throughout the entire economy because of what's going on, from leaders taking the shorts to dealers getting hurt to consumers being hurt. Yeah, it'll be difficult.
So let's just put a bow on this. So if you've got a leased car that you need that's come due,
yes,
really what you should do is, if you can, contact whoever you lease the car to.
Your lender.
First things first, understand your options.
Yes.
If one of your options is still to return that lease and get in a new car, take advantage of that. Review the residual values of the current lease options, but take advantage of that because it's going to be the best deal you're going to be able to get for.
Yes.
Period.
Yes.
That's part number one. Part number two, all the cars that are being returned off lease, specifically from rental car agencies and folks just like you and me who have cars to return, leased cars to return, dealers and captive lenders are going to take a huge hit on that. Tie into that delinquencies and other avenues where used cars get involved. You're probably looking at a huge downturn in used car pricing this summer, through next year. You've got to imagine that used car prices, that there's going to be such an oversupply, like we've been talking about. Dealers are going to have to get rid of those cars. The lenders are going to have to auction them off to their dealer. You want to get a used car deal, especially a car you probably couldn't have afforded before, and you're in a good financial footing, wait 6 months, wait 4 months, go get yourself a hell of a good deal.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Used car prices are going to crater.
Yeah.
They are. There's no way around that, because there's going to be a glut of cars. There's going to be less demand. I mean, if you have 17 million people, 20 million, 25 million people that are suddenly out of work, okay, and trying to get by on unemployment, there isn't a bank in America that's going to say, yeah, let's put you into a new car loan since you have no means. So, I mean, start factoring in how far down the road this is going to go before they're in a situation the automobile business is in a situation to where they can have some type of semblance of recovery. It's going to take quite some time. I mean, could be years, years. You know, and how long is it going to take to get all those people back to work, to where they, you know, they're making a living, and and a bank would feel comfortable lending them money to get a car again. This literally could last years. And honestly, I can tell you that because of that, I am so thankful that I am no longer in the retail automobile business, on the retail side of things. I'll help people try and get a car, and now I think I can help them more than in the past. But I am so glad I'm not the one that's actually selling the car.